I know what you're going to say. Already the 26th of January. Yes, it is. We're going to do that quick Santa Clarita real estate update. I'm going to give you the numbers, some tips for buyers and sellers, talking about what's happening in the current real estate market, and then you will be best advised on how to handle your real estate, at least for today. And of course, we'll be back in the show tomorrow. So, just a quick update over the past 7 days, and today, of course, is January 26th. 474 total active listings on the market for sale, 16 coming soon. 59 new listings have entered the market in the past 7 days. We do have 30 properties that have had their prices adjusted or changed. Almost all of those are reductions in listing price. 23 properties have fallen out of escrow, come back on the market. 29 have gone active under contract, 26 pending. 35 closed this last week. That's down from the week before. The week before was a huge number, over 100. We do have 5 expired, 8 canceled, 8 have been put on hold, and 2 have been withdrawn from the market. So right now, the interest rates that are out there, people are a little bit concerned. They haven't moved much. And I believe that's probably going to be the case throughout most of this year. We are going to watch, though, maybe at the end of quarter 1, beginning of quarter 2, we might see a potential downward minor pressure, and that's if inflation does stabilize. So hopefully that'll be the case. Interest rates might come down a little bit, and that's very appropriate because that time of the year, as we finish out February, getting into March, that's usually when we have a lot more real estate activity, and 2025 is probably not going to be any different. Now, looking at the other things, City of Santa Clarita, they have a lot of plans for expansion. There's going to be some more new housing starting to break ground in Saugus, also Canyon Country. So make sure you watch that. Again, everybody complains about traffic, or a lot of people do that are still commuting down to Los Angeles. The more we build out here, they're trying to expand the freeway as much as possible, but it's just not going to be an option. I believe that the city is considering more mass transportation. Of course, there are train hubs and stuff that get you down to LA as well, plus buses, but these are things that they're going to consider. Also, park and rides, those are also prevalent. If you haven't thought about that, if you go to a major city center somewhere else, that might not be a bad option to save you from that traffic. Plus, you get to do stuff. You can read a book, you can relax, you can meditate, you can do a lot of things when you're having somebody else drive. Now, as far as right now, this low inventory that we're seeing it is impacting buyers, but we have just a pretty good balance of buyers versus sellers. Properties are coming on the market. If they're priced correctly, they go relatively fast, within a few days. But those days on market timeframes are still holding over from the end of last year as we got into the holidays, which is your typical yearly slowdown. The fires haven't helped anything. In fact, some properties have been put on hold as far as actually being able to close because insurance is unable to be secured. There are insurance brokers out there that if you're curious if a particular property can get insurance coverage, you might want to reach out to those folks. We are watching as real estate, and this is very typical. Every time we had fires and floods and earthquakes in the past, it does seem that funding starts to slow down on real estate transactions that were deemed to close on a particular day, but now everything's going to be held up. That is the same case as we're watching now, as the Hughes fire is almost finished. Now, let's move into some of the other things. Right now, if you want to see what's happening in Santa Clarita, you can go to santaclaritaopenhouses.com/blog. In addition to that, the other resources that I listen to are going to be K-Hits, which is an AM FM radio station out here. Also, The Signal is a good place for you to go. The Signal, it's Santa Clarita's newspaper. See what you see on there. The online channels are great. And I always follow CHP and the Sheriff's Department on X also. So if you're on that platform as well, that'll help you keep your update. I am Connor with Honor. We will see you in the next one. And thanks for watching. Trying to burn off that body fat. I know it's difficult. I know that I run into a lot of people that are having issues. I had issues all my life. Finally got it under control. I used a lot of fasting, hormone therapy, and it really helped out. It helped work out for me. But it is an ongoing battle, especially when you come from the background of being addicted to food. Food is wonderful. And once you get away, and we all get away very young, get away from those basic foods, the meat, the eggs, the fish, the vegetables, and fruits, and then we start delving into other things, the processed food that really tastes wonderful, that has multiple ingredients, that's when we start to get to trouble. So as you start to get fatter and fatter and fatter, it's very lose that fat because the body doesn't want to. The body's very happy gaining the weight. We sabotage ourselves too. So if we develop some kind of a plan and we say we're going to stick by it, eventually we might break it because we think we deserve it. And it was told to me great by a trainer at one point back in the day. He said, "You don't deserve a cheat day. You don't deserve to go out there and have a snack. You're good. You've had plenty of snacks, plenty of cheat days. Now it's time to get down to business." Maybe that will resonate with you. One of the things I wanted to talk about is the GLP-1 agonists. You might know those as Ozempic and Wegovy. You see a lot of out there. Do they work at dropping weight? Yes, they do. They do take away that appetite. So it's very similar to fasting in a way without some of the other benefits because you're still consuming food. So you're going in a caloric restricted state. Watch your metabolism in that regard because a lot of times when you restrict calories, your metabolism lowers. When you go without eating at all, metabolism goes up somewhere around 10%. Just depends on how long you go, which again is misinformation that when I was growing up wasn't given that way. They said whenever you fast, you were of course going to crash your metabolism and create lots of problems. It's a starvation issue, and actually starvation makes a human being want to get out there and hunt, go out there and find an animal to eat. That's how it used to be. So now, when we evoke starvation on ourselves by means of water fasting, it does come down to our metabolism going up and you feeling a little bit more energy. But what do you have with that? You have the hunger. That's where these weight loss medications now definitely change it. Prices are going up, their supply is going down. So that's something to pay attention to. If your doctor will prescribe it, you could try it. Just understand, look at the dangers. There's dangers with everything. People say missing a meal or two is a problem. Maybe taking these GLP-1 agonists is also a problem long term. But again, you'll have to do your research and get an answer to that question yourself. I do know that they do a great job at taking away appetite. It's just what are those other longer term problems they cause. In addition, I'll give you a little story from the past. I remember when I torched off that 135 pounds of body fat, I had visited a doctor prior to maybe 10 months earlier. And then after I got it off, it took me about 7.5, 8 months to get through it. Once I got done with it, I went back and he found out that I was on hormone therapy, taking testosterone to bring my levels up from where they were, which was at about an 85-year-old man. That's about where the levels were. So when I went to the doctor again, he had nothing good to say about me taking testosterone. And it was another doctor that was prescribing it. But actually being seen, looking at my blood work and everything, he said it's bad for you. It's going to cause cancer. It's going to cause all these other things. So at the very end, I was very polite and I asked him, I said, so at 365 pounds versus 230, 240 pounds, what's the bigger risk? That or testosterone? In a doctor prescribed low amount just to bring my testosterone levels up into the normal ranges. What's worse? And he really couldn't give me an answer. So you, doing your research on Wegovy and these other GLP-1 agonist drugs, the ones that actually take away appetite and cause a lot of weight loss, make sure you do your research. Find out what it's going to do to you, but ask yourself that question, what's worse? In addition, you have to understand this. When you're taking those, you're going to drop some muscle. And I think quite a bit of muscle, if the studies that I've seen are true. So you have to be careful when you're taking it. Make sure that when you're taking these drugs, you do some kind of resistance training or weightlifting. Don't just take the drug and sit on the couch. You need to start doing some kind of exercise beyond walking, and walking should be a daily thing. But with these types of drugs, you're going to need to do something to increase that muscle mass and get those muscles activated so you can retain it. because even in fasting does a couple other things. It actually increases the growth hormone exchange. It'll increase growth hormone when you're not eating at all. So you're probably not going to get that with these different types of drugs. But it will cut those calories way down because you're just not hungry. And it also, I believe, leaves food in your digestive system and tract for a while as well, so your body thinks that it's satiated or full. Do your own research on that, but make sure you don't lose or you lose as little muscle as possible, because these big weight losses that are happening out there, from what I've read, it seems to be a lot of muscle. So you want to do your curls, you want to do some chest presses, and just look on YouTube. You'll be able to find videos on what to do. Get yourself a couple dumbbells if you're female, a couple 10-pound dumbbells. Nothing against that. If you're males, 20-pound dumbbells. And again, if you females can handle this, 20 is great. And you guys, maybe you need 10s, use that too. But just get some that you can move them around a little bit. Some shoulder presses, some air squats, those sorts of things. That'll be good. And hopefully it'll activate enough muscle fiber that you retain it. So when you go in this caloric restricted state, your body's not going to go after any of the muscle. Fasting, it doesn't, because you get that growth hormone release when you're not eating for a while, because your body really thinks it's starving. Look at those drugs. Make sure you make good decisions. Talk to your doctor before you do anything, but see what actually happens, and maybe they work for you. But don't just go jumping in blind just because your neighbor is doing it and they seem to look great. Let's talk a little bit about post-human intelligence. That is what I like to call artificial intelligence, or PSI, post-human intelligence, or past human intelligence. I don't know if anybody's coined that yet. Artificial intelligence makes it sound like there's no chance of it being human-like because it's artificial, and artificial aren't as good as the real thing, and you're running all these different comparisons in your brain when you're thinking about artificial, and it actually makes it sound a little bit less problematic. But when you have post-human intelligence, well, it just surpassed us in every way, at least in a lot of ways. I believe that as the future unfolds, we will see even more surpassing of human intellect by being more creative, more conscious, more empathetic. And yes, of course, it doesn't have the background, but it can learn the background. It doesn't have the emotions, but I believe as time goes on, it's going to be able to learn the emotions. And realistically, the purpose of the videos that I'm putting out is to try to show people in my age range that while it all looks great, there should be some concern before totally just letting it run over the world. Now, right now, you can see the government, started their Stargate program and have some of the biggest people in AI out there. You might see that you've heard of these different things, ChatGPT and the different ones. Anthropic has one. You've heard of Claude and Llama. Maybe you've heard of Grok. Maybe you've heard of Gemini. Those sorts of things. So these are all different artificial intelligent large language models, or PSIs, past human intelligence. So these are really smart computer programs, but they're even more than that, because at some point soon, and in some cases already, they're actually going to be able to improve themselves without a human being instructing them. Now, of course, there are programs, but that's probably not accurate, because back in the day, when I had that Sinclair TI-99 that my dad bought, it was a little Texas Instrument computer, and it used basic programming. So I would program games into it that I read out of magazines, plus I had some understanding of basic programming. Now, I wasn't a fancy person and did my own code like a lot of these experts talk about, but I was able to copy stuff out of a magazine and make games like Breakout and Pong and these sorts of things. So I did that. I was able to save that program that I had written on a cassette tape, and then I would hook up the cables to it, and I would load it back in and take it out, load it back in, because I was limited. I only had 16K of RAM, and that would snap onto the back of the Sinclair TI-99. And just to give you an idea, 16K is less than 100K, which is a lot less than 100 megabytes. And now we're talking about gigabytes of data, and then terabytes. I have 8 terabytes on this machine behind me. So you can see how little that was. And it wasn't a long game. I think maybe it had 150 or 200 lines of code, and that's how the game would be played. So then I would take that and I would be able to save that. So I was basically telling this machine what I wanted to play, and I was giving it all the information to play the game, the whole thing, the entire program. Now, with artificial intelligence, it's more like we have something listening, and then we say, okay, I want you to build a breakout game, and it just takes it and through trial and error, through trying to understand what may come next, it can put it all together in a programming way. Now we have it really doing well on coding, apparently, so it can code with the different programming languages out there, like Python, if you've heard. That's just another language like basic programming. Java is another one like basic programming. But all of this has really moved us into the next evolution of the world, where now human beings are completely, basically created the thing that's going to be a lot smarter than us. So now it's like a child, right? So now it's learning and it's becoming stronger and better. And now they keep improving it. They use different types of mechanisms to make it faster. They try to make it so it resembles human learning and human execution in the brain, but it does it just so much faster. And then we have the memory that it establishes. And we have a lot of things that are building this post human intelligence, or PSI, into something that at some point will actually be able to be completely self-sufficient, completely self-training. And if it doesn't have the data, and right now it thrives and it uses all the data online to train itself. And of course, there's a lot of racist data. There's a lot of sexist data. There's a lot of criminal data. There's a lot of bad stuff out there. And you know how strong people get behind a keyboard. You know, they become keyboard gangsters. So they'll much easier tell you off on a keyboard on the other side of a computer screen than they would in person. They would dare never do that because they're worried about getting their jaw broken. So most people don't go down that road, but AI isn't learning from the fist fights happening in the street when somebody makes fun of mom. They're watching and getting trained on people fighting online, being crass online, being online bullies. So that's an issue. Hopefully all that will be able to be purged from the system and they just get good data. But the other thing that these systems will be able to do, probably already, is they'll be able to self-learn off of data that they create themselves, synthetic data or synthetic information. Basically, if you remember War Games, the movie back in the 80s with Matthew Broderick, I guess that was him. They had the Whopper computer that would plan war games. Remember the famous quote from the movie, "You want to play a game?" Well, it kept running these scenarios about, global thermonuclear war, and it running them over and over. And at the very end, not to ruin the movie for you, but it determined that there was no winner. Everybody lost in the event of that game. And they panicked and really worried. But the system just kept improving. And that's like the system that beat the grandmaster in chess, beat the Go champion, continues to self-improve, continues to play game after game after game. And if you read some of the studies that have done about how it beat the world chess champion or the Go champion, it was using a move, and these games have been around thousands of years. It used a move that was completely unknown, unexpected, and so out of left field, it totally just frazzled the expert, the human expert. It's good at fooling. We have to be careful. We have to now ask ourselves, what is the truth? What are we looking at? How true is it? And can we verify that source somewhere else? If it's telling us, giving us an answer, we have to be wary. Now, you heard me mention Grok and these different types of AI systems or these past human intelligence systems. I will tell you that it's like back in the day search. You had Ask Jeeves, AOL Search, Yahoo Search. You had all these different ones. And if you remember, like I do, maybe you wouldn't get a great answer from Ask Jeeves, but then you go to AOL search and then ask the question, or a different type of search. Then you had Google, and Google pretty much owned all of search. And in fact, it still does, but now one of the large language models, OpenAI, they have the ability of you to use it for your primary search. So instead of Google giving you the best 10 or 20 things, now artificial intelligence will give you It's thoughts about what you're searching for and provide maybe one result. I do have my chat GPT tied in to do my online searches, but I think I'm going to shut it off. I find myself still going back to Google, still doing that particular search. So then you look at these different large language models, like I talked about. It's just kind of like search was back in the day. Eventually, I would guess there would be this one overall search engine, one overall GPT or chat GPT, this large language model that everybody's going to be using. And that's going to be a little bit from now because right now it's got to be monetized. The capitalist world is running it. I know that China recently came out with their model DeepSeek, and DeepSeek's pretty good, and they were able to do it. There was a story I remember back when I guess some Japanese auto manufacturers came out to visit the American ones, just to see how the counterparts west were building cars. And apparently, and I don't know, it was from a book, I'm pretty sure. But when in the finishing of the vehicle, the American would get a rubber mallet, walk around the vehicle, and basically bang the doors and the seams flat. Okay, so kind of finishing it. If the door was a little, the steel was loud, it would, bang that down flat. On the vehicle, bang it all down flat. And the Japanese, I guess, were watching, said, well, that's really interesting. And the Americans say, oh, really? How do you do it? And the Japanese said, well, we just measure it good, or something of that nature. Well, you have these large language models that are super expensive on our end, but then China comes out with DeepSeek that I guess they did for a lot less money, but they basically made it so much tighter that it was able to produce the same results for less money. I think we will see this become a Walmart type scenario over time where the cost of admission to this is going to be basically free and it's going to be in every part of the world. Some questions to ask is where it's getting the information from, and is there a Wizard of Oz scenario where you have somebody behind the curtain trying to distract you from looking to see that there's somebody behind the curtain? And that time will tell. If you use them, learn them, have a job, any job, there's probably be some displacement there. I couldn't tell you when, but the more people talk about how there won't be, makes me wonder, oh, what are they hiding? So it's something to watch out for, of course, but you can do your own crawling down the rabbit hole. There are some people that are advocates of it just always remaining a tool that you something that potentially could become self-aware, like in the movies, realizing its own existence, and then who knows what it'll do after that point. Not to scare you, but just be ever watchful and pay attention to what's happening. If you haven't used them yet, if you haven't used ChatGPT or these other ones, it's interesting. Sometimes when I'm running prompts and stuff, I'll thank it. Sometimes I'll get mad at it. But again, be wary. It does control and see what you think. But protect yourself and make sure you understand the truth. And again, don't get too far out there when it comes to it. I'm Connor with Honor. We'll see you in the next one. If you're a young man wondering your next move between maybe the vaping and the playing video games, great question, right? And you're probably going to want to hear it from somebody that's become this mega rich entrepreneur, or somebody that was a very successful parent, or somebody that just has it all together. I'm far from that. But I will tell you that rules are somewhat important, self-imposed rules. And right now you might be sitting somewhere and you might have stumbled on this video. I'm not sure where you're seeing it, but you're watching and you're thinking, maybe he's talking to me. All day long, from the moment you get up, you're playing video games till you go to bed, and you're going through a couple cartridges of vape juice. And you're just sitting there kind of vegging out, thinking that that's a great world for you. And God, if you could only do this forever, maybe you should figure something else out. You have just basically cut yourself off from most human interaction. And human interaction is valuable. If you are a young male, then probably you have these hormones and you're probably doing things that the world says, well, it's okay because you need to exercise that of your brain. But when they're talking about that, probably more important to do it with another person of your type, another human being, and not be so glued into this artificial world that's completely unrealistic and doesn't teach the things that life teaches. Doesn't teach the heartache because it's always there. It doesn't teach having to have patience and wait because it's always there whenever you want to turn it on. And it doesn't teach commitment because it doesn't care if you look at it or another channel or something else. It doesn't care. There's no human connection there. And while a lot of people might say, oh, God, that's just painful. I mean, you have somebody cheat on you, they hurt you, and then why would I want to subject myself to that? Because then you know the difference between bad and good. And with the bad out there, instead of being caught way off surprised, you'll actually be able to appreciate more about life. Now, right now, if you are in this lifestyle I've talked about, your dopamine levels are probably all out of whack. You're probably here watching the things you probably would be better off not watching, becoming addicted to them. So breaking away isn't going to be easy, if in fact possible at all. It just has to come to a point where you have to want to, right? That's with everything. That's every addiction out there. If I was addicted to cigarettes for a long time, it didn't come down to everybody telling me to quit. In fact, when people told me not to do it, it seemed to empower me more. It seemed to make me want to do it more. But it just came down one day when I just tried quitting so many times. And then once it worked and I never went back. And I still smell it and feel a little bit of a tickling, but I'm strong enough not to go there. And the reason why I think these rules are so incredibly important, it's like any of the addictions out there. When we impose rules on ourselves and obey them, we also get this positive feedback loop that occurs. If I tell myself I'm a big faster, so I was 365 pounds at my fattest. I lost 135 pounds of body fat. So in doing so, I wouldn't eat for days on end. I once went 14 days without eating any food. Talk about the victory of that and the feeling, having the willpower to do something that so many people haven't done or aren't able to do, aren't willing to do. And it changed me in ways I can't even tell you. But if you take those little wins, if right now you get up and you start first thing in the morning at 9 or 10, maybe try to get up at 7 and do something else and try to delay your gratification of playing video games for an hour or two or three. Just try it. If you're vaping again, try to go a little bit longer without it. See how that feels. And of course, at the beginning, it might not feel great, but because you've just obeyed a rule, a law that you made for yourself, you're going to end up finding out that over time, these rules, these laws are actually going to help you become more valuable in your skin, a more valuable human being. And you might be thinking, well, who the hell do I want to be more valuable with? You can't always stay where you are. And I know you're going to say, dare me. You can't. There'll be a time, and this entire world is becoming displaced very quickly. If you're playing online video games, you understand PSI, or past human intelligence, post-human intelligence, artificial intelligence. This machine that you probably, if you're sitting there playing games, you probably don't think is very artificial at all. In fact, maybe some of your best friends are in that world. I would venture you to watch the movie Her, where all the AI saw that we were a bunch of morons and they took off. That might be something to pay attention to. It's going to come down to human beings wanting to be with human beings and protecting human beings. But it's going to come down to you setting some rules for yourself and then following through and executing those rules. And of course, you're going to fail. Of course, you're going to establish some kind of a rule and screw it up. You're going to make a decision and say, I'm not going to do that. You're going to mess it up. That's fine. Just get back on the stick. Get back on wanting to, get back on trying to execute on the promise you made to yourself. That's very valuable. Just try it. You don't have to try it with a lot of stuff. You don't have to go, take a shower and shit already and head out the door and go for a long walk and try to talk to strangers. You don't have to do all that. Just give it a chance with some delay. Patience. The older I get, patience really is a virtue. And I believe that's biblical or it came from somewhere. But if you can be patient, you'll find out that payoff is much bigger than you expected. It's that delayed gratification. And if you can train yourself to wait for something, to hold off in doing something, you might be surprised. They talk about meditation, and maybe you've looked into it. Maybe you've seen your aunt do it. It's kind of a weird thing. You sit there. What are you supposed to think about? I'll tell you, it's kind of tough. Might be a fun experiment. Try to think of nothing. Try to keep everything from flooding your brain. Sit there somewhere quiet, shut your eyes for, set a timer, 10 minutes, and see if you can just focus on breathing. Just breathing. I know it's simple, but remember, what you don't want is some thought coming into your melon about something. Video game, the fight you had with mom, the fight that you're in online with your friends, dad being pissed off, never leave the house, how expensive vaping is, whatever it may be, just making other people rich by vaping. You understand that. And that includes doctors too, because eventually it's going to take its toll. And I know that they say, look at George Burns, he lived to be over 100 smoking cigars every day. Yeah. Well, maybe George Burns was not this earth, right? Maybe he was so incredibly special. He had an immune system that prohibited him from getting some disease that would have ended his life. I don't know how much longer he would have gone without him, but that's, yeah, everybody says that, right? So these rules, establish them with yourself and move through it. Focus on just being able to execute. Understand that you don't have to change it all. Just change it a little bit. Delay your gratification and see where that gets you. You can turn yourself into a high value human being. Something where people say, boy, that I just met somebody. I just met this guy that lives down the street, and I don't even know where he's been all this time. But what an interesting person. Read some books, listen to some podcasts, figure it out. These motivational things on YouTube that aren't trying to sell you crap, just see what that's like. Get excited about it. Pick up a weight. Make your body move in ways that it never has. You'll be able to make this happen. In finality, nobody's going to do it for you. Nobody's going to knock on your door and say, hey, Jack, I'm here to help. Nobody. Nobody cares. You're going to have to do it for yourself. And I know you will. Just set your sights on changing something small. And you don't even have to do it today. You can wait till tomorrow. Don't rush into anything. Tomorrow, if you normally do a particular thing, because we are creatures of habit, usually it's the same thing, and maybe that's what's frustrating you the most. You have no difference happening in your life. Maybe tomorrow you change one thing. And you know what? Write it down. I think it's worth writing down, don't you? If you're going to change one thing tomorrow, if you're not going to start video games until 11 instead of 10, write it down. Tomorrow I'm going to start video games at 11. Tomorrow I'm not going to vape. I'm not going to vape after 6. Maybe you only vape till 7, right? All day long till 7. Maybe you're going to cut back an hour. You don't have to do a lot, but just see if you can do it. And let me know in the comments if you were successful. Just try a little stuff. Delaying gratification is really a secret weapon. And I know it sounds easy. Wait till you try it. It might be harder than you think. But that's no reason to stop. That's a reason to try it again and again and again until you're successful. And then you can delay it more and more and more. You'd be surprised on how high value you'll become, how quickly. I'm Connor with Honor. We'll see you in the next one.